As night falls over the eastern half of this country, a new day has dawned of the waters of Indonesia, where the search has resumed for an AirAsia jetliner missing for just over 24 hours now, with 162 people on board. In an all too familiar scene after an already tragic year for Southeast Asian carriers, loved ones gathered in airport lounges, anxiously awaiting word of the plane's fate. AirAsia Flight 8501 departed Surabaya, Indonesia, en route to Singapore at 5:35 a.m. local time on Sunday. 42 minutes later, at 6:17 a.m., all contact was lost as the A320 jet vanished from radar. The search is now focused in the Java Sea along the plane's last known position. We have full coverage of this unfolding story. We begin with Katie Tur at the airport in Singapore with the latest on the search. Hello, Katie.
Lester, it's morning here. It's been daylight for about an hour and a half. Authorities know where and when this plane went off radar, so in theory, they should have a pretty good idea of where it is. But after 12 hours of searching in daylight, still no sign of it.
Almost 24 hours after the disappearance of AirAsia Indonesia flight QZ8501, loved ones wait for answers at Indonesia's Surabaya airport. I hope for a miracle, this man says. Two friends and their families were on the plane. He had planned to join them, but canceled 2 weeks ago. Of the 162 people on board, 155 are Indonesian. Families gathered around a board at the airport, their search for names, ending in heartbreak. At 5:35 this morning, the Airbus A320-200 took off from Surabaya, bound for Singapore. At 6:13, the pilot asked to change course and climb higher to avoid the clouds. Only the course change was approved. At 6:17, 42 minutes into the flight, contact was lost. No distress call received. There was severe weather at the time, including high winds, thunderstorms, and lightning.
You're going to have extreme turbulence or hazardous turbulence within the thunderstorm, but also severe turbulence can extend from 20 miles from these thunderstorms. So even if you try to go around these storms, you're going to have a problem.
The possible weather factor, a reminder of what happened to an Air France flight that crashed in the Atlantic Ocean off Brazil in 2009.
The storm affected the technology in the aircraft, and it interrupted the autopilot that was flying the aircraft at the time. It led to the pilots being unable to maintain control of the aircraft and went down.
The captain of the AirAsia plane was experienced with more than 20,000 flying hours. The plane had made over 13,600 trips. The airline is partially owned by the budget carrier AirAsia, based in Malaysia. The CEO took to Twitter saying, "This is my worst nightmare." AirAsia has never had a fatal accident. This has been a tragic year for airlines based in Malaysia. In March, Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 vanished over the Indian Ocean while flying from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing, with 239 people on board. No trace of the airliner has been found since. Then in July, another Malaysia Airlines flight was shot down over rebel-held territory in Ukraine. All 298 passengers and crew members were killed. And now what has become a familiar scene in Southeast Asia as loved ones wait for word on what happened to another jetliner that ran into trouble in the sky.
As we know from MH370, they do have those black boxes and their pings if they need them. But this is only 24 hours into the search. Right now, they're looking for debris, both on the water and on land, as there are a number of highly vegetated islands in that area. Lester?
Katie Tur tonight from Singapore. For more on what searchers and investigators will be focusing on, let's bring in aviation expert Greg Feith, a former senior air safety director with the NTSB and a veteran pilot. Greg, if this pilot was trying to avoid storm cells, what would have happened if the plane had flown into one anyway? What's the worst case of flying into that kind of weather?
With these kind of thunderstorms, Lester, the big issue here is the vertical up and down drafts and, of course, the content. That is the hail, the rain, the lightning. All of those will combine to create a situation for pilots, whether it compromises the structural integrity of the airplane or compromises the pilot's ability to control the airplane, and a loss of control could render it, in a high-speed dive and then, of course, into open ocean or over land.
It's 447 in 2009. That plane disappeared over the sea in an area not covered by radar. In this case, there was radar coverage. Does that lead you to believe we'll get answers here and maybe find the wreckage fairly quickly?
I think that's going to be a fortunate focal point for this part of the investigation. We do have some decent radar data. They may have to do some trajectory studies to pinpoint really the search area. But I think that based on the information that's available right now, I think searchers are going to have a pretty focused area to look at. And I think that the aerial survey, that is all of the airborne assets, are probably going to be those assets that find the floating debris.